Hi, 6th grade. We're getting ready to start a new chapter of Populations and Community, Chapter 9. We're going to move from studying all the universe and the stars to putting our focus right here on planet Earth, and it's all about animals, and I love when we talk about animals, and I hope you do too. So get your notes out. I will be checking notes, so put them on Google Slides or Google Docs, something that you can easily share with me. Okay, so let's get into it. Chapter 9, Populations and Communities. This information starts on page 300 in your book, and in lesson 1 that we're going to cover today, we're going to reference the prairie dog a lot. So I want you to watch this little introductory video on prairie dogs to give you a little bit of background information on these cute little critters. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so as you can see at the top here, you do not have to copy this chart or write anything down. I just want to go over the difference between biotic factors and abiotic factors with you. If you can see here, bio means life, and so if it's a biotic factor, it is living. Abiotic is a in English, a prefix means without, so without bio, life, without life. So it'd be your non-living factors in an environment. So if we're looking here at this prairie dog environment, I would say if you were in class with me, I'd be like, okay, kids, what is some of the biotic factors in this picture? And I'd hope, well, right off the bat, you would say, Miss Fabian, duh, a prairie dog. Yes, prairie dog, ding, ding, ding. Now it's going to get a little tougher. What else would be alive in this picture? Well, you could say insects and birds are there. Okay, I'll take that. But don't forget about our lovely plant kingdom, guys. The trees and the grass are also living parts of this environment. Now, abiotic factors, some non-living things. Well, dirt that the grass and the trees are growing in, and the soil, yeah, that is definitely non-living. But some things that kids might forget about that is very important to every living creature's environment is the sun, which we've already talked about with energy. It gives us all of our energy, starts there, and air that we, all living things here on Earth, need to breathe. So some 3 abiotic factors would be sun, air, and dirt. Now it's time to start typing. Lesson 1 is all about populations and the levels of organization that we have. And the biggest level of organization that holds everything, the head honcho, the big shebang, is the biosphere. And that is not only the Earth, but the atmosphere that extends out from it. And it's all the living stuff, all the animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, and all the non-living factors, the abiotic factors, such as the dirt, the oceans, the lakes, the continents and islands, all in the air, the atmosphere, if I didn't already say that. So, and it goes all the way down into the deepest part of the Earth, the core. So that is the biosphere. It goes from the deepest part of the core all the way out into the outermost atmosphere. So it's Earth and all its surrounding. Bio, life, sphere, circle, biosphere. Now before we go further and copying any more notes down, I would like for you to get a biosphere levels of organization image. That's what I typed in to get this. Biosphere levels of organization. And this will really help you visualize how we group things and all the different vocabulary words we're going to be talking about in this first lesson. As you can see up here is the big biosphere that we talked about earlier, where it contains everything, just the last slide. But then we break it down into smaller groups. We have biomes, which are geographic regions, ecosystems, which are all the living and non-living things in an area, a smaller area. Community is just all the living stuff in that same area. Then you have small populations, and that's all a group of one species, and then breaks it on down finally to the individual. So that is our levels of organization, and we do that a lot in science. Just like your body systems, we go from the cell, a group of cell makes tissues, a group of tissues makes an organ, a group of organs makes a systems. We like in science to kind of do different levels of organizations to keep things organized in our mind as we talk about them. Okay, so I hope you were able to find that same image that I found or something very similar. So we're going to start at the bottom where we had individuals, and then a group of individuals make up a population. All the organisms of the same species that live in an area. So here we have, a prairie dog population. It's probably much larger than that if you expand out the area. But it all has to be the number of prairie dogs in an area would be a prairie dog population. A community, on the other hand, would be all the populations of different living things that live in the same area with the prairie dog. So we would count owls in the prairie dog community, and snakes, rattlesnakes that live in the prairie dog community, and foxes, and probably insects, of course, too, and other birds. But those would be examples of different populations that share or live in the same community together. The main difference, populations, is only one species, so it would be all the number of prairie dogs. The community would be all the different species that live in that same area with the prairie dog. That would be the prairie dog community. The next level up is an ecosystem, and that is all the interactions of the community. But we also include now not just the living things, but non-living things. So the prairie dogs are going to interact with stuff in its community. And in fact, we're going to watch a short video clip right now of prairie dogs and the rattlesnake and their interaction in their community. Didn't you think those prairie dogs were very clever burying the snake? I loved it. But the interaction between the prairie dogs and the snake is obvious, but also if you think about the non-living thing in the environment that those prairie dogs interacted with, those burrows that they protected them, and then they could bury the snake in their own burrow. So prairie dogs have tons of interaction with the living and non-living things in their ecosystem. So the ecosystem, the big key word there in an ecosystem is the interaction between the living and non-living things in the environment. Community is just sort of a list of the living things in the environment. Ecosystem goes on to include the non-living things and then how everything interacts together. And then the second to last big one before you get to biosphere is biome. And that's just a geographic area that animals live in that have a very similar temperature and rainfall. And you've probably heard of a lot of these. And so another image I would like for you to get is a biome map, world map. And prairie dogs live in this yellow type region, the steppe, or you can call it the prairies, and sort of dry, grassy lands. We in Indiana live mostly in the deciduous forest, maybe a little bit of grassland, but mostly the deciduous forest area. And my son living out in Seattle would be more the coniferous forests or the taiga. So very cool places, lots of different things. And we got the desert too out here in California or Nevada, all that area down there. So different biomes around the world. You see that there's cold deserts too, right up here in Antarctica. Very cold, not very much life. Desert means not a lot of rainfall. But the difference between the desert in Africa, it's very hot, than the polar desert, obviously very cold. So their temperatures, their rainfall is the same, very little rainfall, but their temperatures are quite different. So they don't get quite the same biome name. Okay, so now for a little help with your homework assignment. You're going to find this on Google Docs attached to Google Classroom. You're going to have to do this for a chimpanzee, tiger, panda, or camel. I'm going to go through it with you using the prairie dog example that we've been talking about. Your chart might have to be expanded a little bigger because, as you see in the very last column, you're going to have to add pictures, and that's going to take up some space. So individual, definition, one organism. Description for my organism, one prairie dog. And then I get a picture of a prairie dog. Population, definition, a group of one species. Description, a family of prairie dogs, or a town or a colony of prairie dogs. And then I'd have a picture of my colony of prairie dogs. For community, definition, all the living things that live in an area. Description for my prairie dog, I would say prairie dogs, snakes, owls, foxes. And then I'd find a picture of all those animals. Now that one might be hard just to find one picture. I might have to get different pictures of different living things that live in my animal's community. Ecosystem, how living and non-living things interact in an area. And so for my prairie dog, description for the prairie dogs, I would say a group of prairie dogs defend themselves against a snake, because that would be an example of how my prairie dog interacts with other living things in his, or anything in his ecosystem. It can be a non-living thing that your animal interacts with too. And then I'd find a picture of my prairie dogs and a snake. Biome, definition, a geographical area with the same temperature and rainfall. Description for my prairie dog organism, well, prairie dogs live in a steppe. That's the name of their biome, or a prairie. And I would find a picture of that biome. And then biosphere is going to be the same for everyone, because the biosphere contains all those animals: chimps, tigers, pandas, camels, and my prairie dog. So good luck to you. Get that done. And you can always email me or text me if you have any questions. Good luck.